In this lecture, we'll be looking at the different number formatting options that Excel has and how they really work. For that, let's use our second sheet in our data. Right now, we do not require the example sheet from the previous lecture, so what we can do is simply delete it. I can right-click on it and select delete. Excel will ask me if you want to permanently delete the sheet, and I will click on delete. That is yes. Coming to other details sheet, here we can fill out a few details of COVID in India. So for example, the first thing that we have here is cost of a test. Let's say the cost of a test is 4,500 rupees. So I'll type down 4,500 and hit enter. Then the number of tests conducted in India. Let's say that is, let's keep a simple number. So let's say that is 1 lakh. Okay, so 1, 2 zeros, and then again 3 zeros. Hit enter. Coming to mortality rate, let's say that is 3% in India. So I'll simply write 3 here. Okay. Date of data record and time of record is something that we'll be looking at a later stage. Let's start off with the first number that we have here, which is cost of a test. Now, this 4,500, that is this number, is not just a random number. It's not the quantity of tests, that is how many tests were conducted. That is actually the price of a test. It involves a currency, which in this case is INR, right? So I simply do not want to give 4,500 as the number for the end user. What I want to do is to actually write a rupee symbol here. But how do I do that? Should I actually have a rupee symbol copied from somewhere and then inserted here? Not really. Instead, what you can do is take the help of Excel's number formatting options, which is this section under the Home tab. So at the top, you have a drop down. What you can do is simply go to a cell, go to the drop down, and inside that, you have the option of making it as currency. Once you click on it, Excel automatically adds a rupee symbol here and 2 zeros after the decimal. Now notice that this is not manually added by you. So you don't actually add the rupee symbol here. You do not actually have this .00 typed in. This is just Excel's way of showing your data. So understand that the various formatting options that you have here is just the way Excel shows your data. It is not really a change that you have made, right? So here, if I zoom in a bit as well, what you can do is actually remove these 2 zeros, because that is something that we don't really require. We do not have our test cost in paise. It's not 4,537 paise or 54 paise. It's exactly 4,500. So what you can do is remove these 2 extra zeros. But if I try to edit this cell by double clicking, you can see that I only have 4,500. Nor do I have the rupee symbol, nor do I have that .00. So how do I remove that .00? What you can do is select that cell, and below the drop down, you see these 2 buttons, increase decimal and decrease decimal. You can make use of that. So clicking on these buttons either adds a decimal or removes a decimal. If you click on it once, for example, if I click on decrease decimal, it will remove 1 decimal at a time. So if I click on it right now, 1 decimal has gone away. If I click on it again, the second decimal has gone away. If I want to bring in a decimal, I can select increase decimal like this. Now, understand that this actually rounds off your number. So for example, if I had 4,500.587 rupees, which is my cost, I could go to again drop down currency, change it to currency. I already have 2 decimals here, but my data is .587. Where's the third decimal? It has been rounded off to 59. Why? Because 7 is greater than 5. So it automatically adds 1 to 8 and makes it 9. So your data becomes 0.59. Now, if I wanted to round this off to only have one decimal, so if I try to decrease a decimal, it would again round off my data. So this 9, because it is higher than 5, will be added to 5 here, and this 5 will become 6. So if I click on decrease decimal, you can see it has turned into 6. Because this is 6, if I try to remove one more decimal, that is have no decimals in this data, my 4500 will become 4501. So remember, these buttons actually round off your data to the next decimal. It does not remove that extra part of your data completely. It simply rounds it up. Okay. Now that we have this data here, what I can do is remove the extra decimals. Coming to number of tests conducted in India. So what you can do for this data is go to the drop down and make Excel realize that this is a number. Okay, so we already looked at currency. Now, what we can do is specify this as a number, because this is not really a currency, it's just a number. If I click on this, it adds that .00 at the end. That is something that we don't really require, so we can remove it as well. Now, one more thing that would be really helpful in this case is to have a thousands separator. So right now, this number, because it has a lot of zeros, is not really helping me to understand what the number is in the first look, right? I need to actually pay attention to it, count the number of zeros, and figure out, acha, this is 1 lakh. But what if I don't want to do that? What if Excel could help me out in that? And you bet it can. So what you can do is simply use this option of comma style, which is next to your increase and decrease decimal buttons. You click on it and Excel will add commas as thousand separators. So you have a comma before, or sorry, after thousands here and after lakh as well. And so would be the case when it comes to crores. Okay, so now this number is more readable. I know that this is 1 lakh just by looking at the zeros and the commas. Here again, I can remove the decimals, because understand that test cannot be half. No one can have a half of a test of COVID, right? So we can also decrease the decimal here and save up some data space. Okay. Coming to mortality rate. So mortality rate could be in percentages. Simply writing 3 does not help the user understand if it's percentage, 3 as in the 3 people, what is the mortality rate, right? So there are 2 ways to write down your answer or this mortality rate as percentages. The simplest and the easiest way that I would recommend you all to use is typing in 3 and then percent. So once I hit enter, I go back to this, you can see that Excel has automatically recognized this as percentage. If that was not the case, your cell would be set to general. So notice that if I click on this cell or this cell, whatever cells do not have a specified formatting will be set to general. Okay, general is basically Excel's way of telling us that we haven't selected any type of formatting to this cell. We haven't applied anything to this cell. But once we do that, once we change it to, let's say, a currency or a percentage, you will see that Excel is now displaying that information here in the drop down. So here you have percentage. You can do the same. For example, if it was 5%, right now, if you look at this cell, it is set to have no specific formatting. But as soon as I type 5% and hit enter, it changes to percentage. Another way to make this a percentage is to write the actual percent, then go to the drop down and change it to percentage. So for example, if I wanted to write 3% here, if I write 3 here, go to the drop down and then try to change it as percentage, see what will happen. Instead of changing it to 3%, Excel changes it to 300%. Now, why is that the case? Why does Excel do that? Does it not understand that 3 is actually 3%? Yes, actually it doesn't. What you need to do is to actually type your percent from 0 to 1. Excel understands that language. So when you want to type in 3% using this method, instead of typing 3, you need to type 0.03. And that will help you change your data using the drop down into a percentage, which is 3%. This happens because percentages lie between 0 to 1. So it is per cent. Cent is 100. So your data will be from 0 to 1. So if you wanted to write 25%, it is not simply 2525. It is actually 0.25. Now, instead of using this long process of writing down something between 0 to 1, then going to the drop down, selecting it as percentage, what you can do is simply write it as the number and then add a percentage, and Excel will recognize it as a percentage. So this is the simple way of doing it. You can always opt for the drop down way. The answer or the value that you get here will remain the same. When it comes to date of data record, let's say we are trying to input today's date. So how do I do that? We have a shortcut for it in Excel, which is Control and the semicolon in your keypad. Then you can hit enter and you get your date here already inserted using the shortcut. Now, if you look at it in the drop down, it is a short date. What if you want to have it as a long date? So when I say what is a long date actually, let's talk about that. Long date is actually where your month is typed as text. So if it's 07, it is July. What you can do is simply go to the drop down and change it to long date, and it will change it to 14 July 2020 instead of being 14/07/2020. Now, this is really helpful because it helps you avoid that process of changing your number to actual month name. Right now, we only have one cell which is having dates, but when you actually work with a lot more data, you will see that you will have a lot of cells having dates in that particular format. If you want to change it to a long date format, this is the easiest way to do it. Coming to the time of record, we also have a shortcut for that, which is Control Shift semicolon. So right now it is 5:50. I'll hit enter and you can see that I have the time here. I can change the formatting of this particular cell by going to the drop down and selecting time. Now, this really doesn't affect your data as such, right? Because earlier also we had 1750:00. Right now also we have that. But trust me, changing it into a time format later on helps you a lot. And how does it help you? Why do we have to do all of this? We'll come to that later. So for right now, this is the way to go. Another way in which you can type down your time is by saying AM or PM. So if it's 5:50 PM, I can simply write 5:50 PM. And if I go to the drop down and change it to time, Excel will show me the 24-hour format. For the last thing in this lecture, let's discuss how to change the currency involved here. So right now we have rupee 4500. What if I was showing this data to someone who is based in the US? He might want to see this data in, let's say, dollars. So how do we change this to dollar? Let's say 4500 is, let's say, roughly $40, for example. Okay. Yeah, it is $40. Now, how do I change this dollar to, how do I change this to dollars instead of having rupees? I can simply go to the drop down that is at the bottom here, which is called accounting number format. Click on the drop down, which helps me look at the different currency options that I have in Excel, and I can choose from it. So if I want dollar, I can simply select dollar and my rupee will change to dollar. If I want to have it as euro or Chinese or just pound, all of that, I can select that from here as well. If you want to have more currency options, Excel has currencies for all the countries in the world. You can go to more accounting formats. And from the symbol, you can select whatever you want. Okay, you have a list of options. Once done, you can simply hit enter and have it here. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.